I'd like to call the meeting to order. The City of Colwood notice of, the Environment Committee meeting, Monday, June 17th, 2024. And it's 2:31 p.m. because we don't like to be in too much of a hurry. I'd like to acknowledge with respect that we're meeting on the traditional territory of the Lagoon speaking people, and we are honored to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of the Songhees and the Coatzacoalcos nations. I'd like to, we need a motion, I guess, for approval of the agenda. Someone, anyone? Motion, Devin. And all those, anyone opposed? None. The adoption of the minutes, the Environment Committee meeting minutes, February 20th, 2024. A recommendation that they be accepted, adopted as presented. Need a motion for that too, right? Yes. Thank you. Charlotte moves that. Any opposed? And that's accepted. Public participation. Anyone interested in? No one online? I see Tanner's here with us today. Gord? Nobody, no public. New business. So that brings us right through to 5.1 on the agenda, which is the Britney Stojke. Is that your, can you pronounce my name? Sorry. Special event and filming process at the Lagoon Beach. And we're looking for, could I get your pronunciation?
Yeah, it's Stojke.
Oh, I wasn't sure.
German Polish, it always trips everyone up.
Well, Stojke. Well, at least they had the J separate at the, anyway. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So yes, I'm Britney Stojke on the communications team, and I'm here today with a briefing regarding special events and filming at Lagoon Beach. So at the regular council meeting on March 11th, council directed staff to consult with the Parks and Trails and Recreation Committee, as well as the Environment Committee, to refine the criteria by which events and activities are permitted at Lagoon Beach, while also transitioning events away from Lagoon Beach over the next 3 years, which we've already begun to do. So just a bit about the special event process as it stands. Organizations or members of the public who are wishing to host an event in a public space in Colwood currently submit a special event application or a filming application. And this process ensures that there are no overlapping events, ensures that all departments are aware these events are happening. We can ensure public safety requirements are met, neighborhood impacts are considered, as well as environmental and ecological impacts, among other things. There are no current special event or filming fees associated with these applications. Companies who film in Colwood are required to obtain a business license, and special event and filming applicants are also required to obtain public liability insurance. Council has indicated a desire to explore charging for film permits, and staff is in the process of connecting with the Vancouver Island South Film and Media Commission to determine these fees, which will align with municipalities in the region. Another thing to bring up here is the waterfront stewardship plan considerations, which we know is underway, and will help us guide and approach how the community interacts with the shoreline along the lagoon and at the beach. One thing of note is currently underway is a biodiversity baseline study, which will better inform if there are seasons, times of day, specific noise levels or activities that we should avoid, and or work around to reduce the impact on migratory birds. So now on the last page of the briefing here, we have a table prepared with a list of common applications the city receives for special events and filming around the Esquimalt Lagoon. What we are seeking today is this committee's recommendation to either support or not support each type of event at Lagoon Beach as listed below. So it's a bit of a lengthy table, but I'll go through each item and then invite any questions, clarifications. And of course, if you have questions as I go along, please feel free to let me know. Thanks, Amanda. Okay, so starting with our first event type, these are small group gatherings. So these are defined as less than about 50 people, and they include things such as birthday parties, small family gatherings, beach cleanups. So the conditions that we are proposing for this type of event is that they may be permitted if they meet event conditions, which will be outlined by our internal group, which is composed of members from each department of the city who review each application. Insurance for this small group gathering would not be required. There will be no commercial sales allowed, and there will be no fee associated. So those are the conditions we're proposing for that first event type.
Excuse me, Brittany.
Yeah.
Would you like us to ask questions as we go through this list? Maybe it would be easier than
Yeah.
if you go through the whole list, we'll have to repeat
That would
it
be
anyway.
fantastic. Yeah, let's go forward
Okay,
with that.
so
Thank you.
that was number one on the table.
Correct, small group gathering.
I would have one question. If you get the small groups, I completely understand that it makes sense to support them in this way as you've outlined. But if we've got this new trail put through, which is to protect the natural thing, how, like, there are areas to be defined where we can ask people to stay within? Or again, of course, there's going to be areas where they're restricted. But if they have a large group, 50 is a fairly good sized group. They're going to, although it's called a small group gathering, then, right? There's 48.
For sure.
I can see how there would be a tendency for kids to run around in the restricted areas, et cetera. So can you explain a little bit how that might?
Yeah, absolutely. I will also note Sandra's here with me, and if she wants to jump in at any time, more than welcome.
Yeah.
But these conditions have been kind of defined in the state as we are right now. As the waterfront stewardship plan continues to be designed and reviewed, we will need to make some adjustments to define those spaces, and maybe we're similar to our city events, pushing these more towards the beachlands development where the space is more appropriate.
Yeah, thank you. I can see how there'd be different because you even have a higher, like a rail fence or who knows, right? Okay.
Yeah, thank you
Lois,
for that.
did you have a question? Yeah. Okay, Lois, please go ahead.
Yeah, do I have to press it again? Oh,
No, you
okay.
don't. I do it here, and then when it goes red, you're live.
Okay, something related to this, but it's relevant to all of the categories. I'd like to see something in there about a requirement for the groups to do their own cleanup afterwards. And this also relates to fee or no fee. If you're not charging a fee, but people fail to clean up, would there be an opportunity to, charge them for staff time to clean up? And also related to this one and all the other ones, I'd like to see something about not smoking, because cigarette butts can be particularly harmful to the wildfowl and to the marine life. And then one final thing, which is just an observation, not related to the environment at all, but there's a reference there to church groups, and I think that's great for things like, church picnics, that kind of thing. But I have observed on at least one occasion where there was a church group holding an actual service, which was witnessed by a gay couple, and there was an altercation not an altercation, a confrontation, because the church group was, let's say brilliant. They were anti-gay, well known to be anti-gay, and it was offensive to the public, particular to these members of the public, to have, a public gathering that was espousing anti-gay philosophy. So
Yeah, understood.
don't know if
Thank
that
you
can
for
be a
those notes.
consideration for approving church groups.
Thank you.
Thank you. Almost feel like a deposit, and if you clean up, you get your deposit back.
Mhm.
So a little extra administration, though, I understand. Wonder if you have to go there. Presumably, it's almost like the beach is an open air rec center facility in a sense that it gets to be that way. And Boy, this speech is becoming awfully popular, so
Is-
anyway. Uh, who's next here? Charlotte? Charlotte, go ahead.
I just have sort of an overall question for, would apply to all the groups that end up there. And I'm just wondering about how these, I won't say rules, but how these conditions are enforced or monitored, because a lot of them happen on weekends. I don't know, do we have any way of checking that these conditions are being met?
Yeah, thank you for that. They are sent out, we send out letters of understanding to the groups, which list all of the conditions. We're kind of on good faith, hoping that these groups are following these. And in our experience, the groups that we've had come through have been quite well at following the conditions that they're given. Our bylaw team would be the ones, I imagine, that would respond to any complaints should they arise. And those would be coming from community members if they should come up.
Thank you. It's like they could have a reference to speaking to the natural aspect of it. The letter of understanding could have a little bit of an outline about the sanctity of the place, if you will, environmentally.
Great idea. Thank you.
Okay, Karen, you're up. Oops.
Thanks, David. That is just what I wanted to speak about is the sanctuary. Sanctuary is a place of refuge and protection for migratory birds. And in conjunction with that ecosystem, there's various ecosystems, eelgrass beds, different marine ecosystems. There's Pacific sand lance that lay their eggs on the foreshore. As David mentioned, the beach is becoming an area of recreation. And I guess I'll just say up front, I think all group activity should be transitioned away from Esquimalt Lagoon and Cobourg Peninsula towards more appropriate people areas. Maybe that's the beachlands. And I want to commend Mayor and Council for moving the Wildwood sauna to a different location. And they did that with sensitivity and respect. And I think it's working out well now. They're at the beachlands and they're at Bilston Farm as well. So I think, Brittany, you want to go through the categories and have us respond to each category. Is that, and I'm wondering if we could, if you went through all the categories and then we could respond at the end, because I know I'll be repeating the same thing over and over.
Yes. Thank you for that comment. Certainly whatever format, I know it's a lot of information to go
Well,
through, but whatever.
So, yeah,
format.
we still have some people lined up to speak, and I had suggested we could ask questions as we go, and here we got stopped on number one. I think a lot of the comments that are being made would apply to all the categories. However, there is some specific items through. So let's finish off this one for now and keep going in this regard. And I think Devin, you haven't spoken yet, so you're next.
Thanks, Dave. The table makes reference to event conditions and considerations. Are these kind of subjective criteria, or are they like objective spelled out kind of conditions that people can expect to be applied consistently?
We have certain ones that are, thank you for that, sorry. We have certain conditions that are repeated through many of our groups, such as we don't allow any stakes or any sort of digging into the sand. So those ones are often repeated, as well as we always ask our guests at the Lagoon Beach to ensure that they're cleaning up after themselves and removing their garbage. So those sorts of standard conditions will always be in place. But then, as I mentioned, our special event review group is comprised of of a member from each department in the city. So if they review the application and see any specific criteria that they would like to see or specific conditions, then they will send those back to me and they will be included in the letter of understanding.
Thanks for your answer.
Thank you. And Lois, number two.
Before I say anything else, I just wanted to commend you on how the whole report was put together. I think it was really well done, and I really liked seeing the reference to the migratory bird sanctuary and how that's being cared for. So this just relates to the conditions. And I'd mentioned the cigarette butts, but I neglected to mention that plastic and mylar balloons. We often see events where those are put up and they often escape, and those are quite hazardous to animals, birds, and
Mhm.
marine life.
Thank you for noting that. Definitely a good condition to include as well.
The restricted list gets longer. We'll drive them out of there, I guess.
Just call
No.
us the Scrooge Committee.
Yeah, the Scrooge Committee. I think, Karen,
We may end up sounding like the Scrooge Committee, but I know for myself, as a member of the Environment Committee, I take seriously the environment, and it's the lens through which I look at things. And particularly given that other species have no vote, I feel like I'm, helping to represent. And I do think the report, I commend you for being proactive. We know Colwood's population is going to perhaps double in the next decade. So it's good to be proactive about protecting nature. I notice you, in your report, you have climate considerations. You talk about GHGs, lowering GHGs, waste management, and active transportation, but I don't see any mention of I think it's the 5th pathway of the Climate Action Plan, biodiversity and natural solutions. And just wondering why that wouldn't be in there.
That may have just been a miss on our end. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. And we can ensure that that's included when we do go to council with a report back from the committee. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
thank you. Let's move on then and move through some, because I think the very general statements here that are helpful to me to understand where we're going.
Certainly.
And then as we get to some of the more specific items, as we go, we'll interrupt you again, perhaps.
Yeah.
I don't mind this stall and talk and then move and stall. I think we'll carry on with that format, but so continue. Thanks, Brittany.
Thank you. No, thank you for being open to this discussion. It's a little easier to work through the table this way, so I appreciate it. So number 2 here is our medium group gathering. So we're defining that as 51 to 200 people. This would include things like our beach events down with music at the Lagoon, things like larger wedding ceremonies, company parties, and school field trips. It's a very popular destination for those types of events. So similar to the conditions in the first event type, these would be permitted if they meet event conditions. Insurance would not be required, no commercial sales, and there would be no fee for this type of event. As that one is quite similar, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the third one. Unless there's any questions, just interrupt me. Oh,
Yeah. Hey, double. So keep hitting the wrong button. Sorry, here. There we go. You're live.
Thanks. I do have a question about number 2 there. And it's regard to alcohol. Is the sales or the alcohol permitted at all on these like festive events? Just want to judge people's behavior and
yeah, thank you
what
for
are the
asking
criteria?
that. We have at past beach music event allowed one of our local vendors, which is a mobile bar, to apply for a liquor license and come down and serve during the event. We have gone away from that this year, just with the trends. It's we're getting more into non-alcoholic drinks, as we know. So just to keep with those trends, we're going in that direction, and just to ensure safety and security of the location that we're in.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Go on, Karen.
Just as I mentioned in number 1, I think it would be useful to have like consistent criteria.
Mhm.
Like it's tough for people to plan events if they don't know what's expected of them. And so that's kind of my request at this point.
Certainly.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. And I hope this this discussion and as we work through the special events and filming permits, that will emerge. So thank you.
Okay, and Lois.
Just wondering, is there any consideration to whether people, when you have a larger group from 50 anywheres up to the end of your list, might want to have signage to direct people to the site. And are there any kind of restrictions on that and on the kinds of, I don't know, the language that could be used on the signs or anything along those lines?
Thank you for the question. We would ask our groups if they do plan to put up any directional signage that they would include it in their application. We haven't come across it too often, except for our very large events such as Tour de Victoria and those types. But that's a great point to bring up and something that we'll be aware of in the future just to keep an eye on. Thank you.
Thank you. Pamela.
Going off what Karen was saying a little bit ago, in terms of sanctuary, has there been any, I don't know, studies done of sound and music and its impact on, species in certain times of the year when they're more sensitive to that, and seasonally when this can be allowed and when it shouldn't?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'm just gonna pull that note up before I call it the wrong name. The biodiversity baseline study is going to be addressing that. That is part of the waterfront stewardship plan. And that study is currently underway and will give us a bit more information about, as you mentioned, the types of the sounds that may impact the wildlife, if there are times of the year that they're more sensitive, those types of information. So that will hopefully be addressed in that study. Thank you.
Karen's hot on the button. Did you want to say, Karen? Okay. Karen?
Do you know when the biodiversity study will be available?
I don't know that offhand. I apologize. I know it's currently underway.
So I think Mr. Brewer has Ian's got a suggestion.
Ian may have.
Hi, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so we're doing project development and design right now. We're hoping to go to procurement for a consulting team in probably late August. It's tough to do procurement for that type of project over the summer. And the hope is that in Q1, Q2 next year, we have a completed project.
At first I thought, oh, this is urgent. It's the start of summer, but in fact, this gives us a perfect opportunity in the context of this question and what we're trying to establish here to observe what is kind of status quo, I guess. Interesting. Thanks, Ian. Anyone else right now? Go and perhaps move on then, Brittany, number 3.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
Thank you. So number 3 is our large group gathering. So we're defining this as over 200 people. So sometimes our school beach days do fall under this category, as well as events such as I just mentioned, the Tour de Victoria. Western Canadian Beach Sprint is an annual event that takes place at the Lagoon Beach traditionally. We've also listed a couple of events that aren't right on the Cobourg Peninsula, but Indigenous Peoples Day does take place on the lagoon at Royal Roads University. As well as some larger events such as the Insight Festival did take place at Fort Rod Hill, but I believe it's being moved to another location this year. So just as reference. So the conditions here, again, permitted if they meet our event conditions. Insurance would be required for these. Commercial sales, again, not permitted at Lagoon Beach. And then we are proposing a new fee to cover administrative costs related to city review, traffic safety, notification, and promotion for these types of events. For any questions?
Yeah, you seem to be a lot on this one. Oh, there we have Karen. Thank you.
Brittany, so these are primarily annual events.
Yes, thank you. Often these are annual events because, yeah, they take such planning. Tour de Victoria, for example, they have a quite streamlined system that they come back to us with year after year. So primarily, yes.
One more question, if I may. Have you involved the Lekwungen speaking people regarding these changes or proposed changes? Do they have an opportunity for input? Just thinking, we know Indigenous stewardship is becoming increasingly valued.
Yeah, Thank you. Thank you for that question. To date, they have not been, just because we hope to go with a more fulsome package. And then once we have something prepared, then my expectation is that we would invite for collaboration and comment. Thank you for that note.
Thank you, Devon.
It says here that on the large group gatherings that there's no commercial sales. I would think that as the gatherings get bigger, the need for commercial involvement would be higher. And I think it might be appropriate to have commercial sales if you're gonna charge a fee, just to balance out the equation. So that's just the comment. And then for all the gatherings, I'm just wondering, how do you incorporate washroom facilities and like hand washing stations? It sounds like there'll be, food and lagoons paired together. So I just want to make sure sanitation and sanitary concerns are also considered in these gatherings as appropriate to the size of the gathering, I guess. Thanks.
Thank you for that. I will say, for the larger gatherings, they often are renting their own facilities, their own portable washrooms and things like that, which they are making the city aware of. And we have designated spots that we recommend they be placed, and they are reviewed by our team. And those will come with hand sanitizers, not necessarily washroom facilities, but, hand washing facilities, but hopefully that addresses that question. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one question about parking of the groups. I think less than 50, it's a pretty big open parking area as it is now, but with 200 people, it starts to create a cluster. Is there some way that we can allow or assist people to have a event parking designation for the period of time that that event is likely to happen? In the case where they're booking it, especially I should think for the larger stuff, but the larger stuff probably takes up the whole thing. Anyway, I was just thinking about that to help control it, and maybe someone with a vest can go a long way towards squeezing about twice as many cars in. I'm exaggerating maybe, but you can usually get quite a few more cars in if someone's actually asking people to tighten up. And you see it when you go down, there's always these half parking space gaps. So that was just wonder if whether it would be the 50 or 100 or 200 would be the number where that would be a service that we would expect. And then they would pay the city to help that, whether it's a city person or whether we ask they designate someone. I don't know, you have volunteers at concerts. I've been to classical concerts at rural churches, and they'll have volunteers out there parking. It's astounding how many cars they can get into their lots.
Yeah.
And I just think it might help mitigate some of the challenges of with conflict and so on. And then the barriers would be set up maybe an hour or two beforehand to make sure the spots were available for those attendees. Just wondering how far you get, but anyway.
Thank you for that. Sorry, if I may, we do ask all of our groups that fill out a special event application about their impacts on parking. So that's something that we could definitely explore. Yeah, thank you.
Seems to work. Like even when you did the music stuff down there, I'm amazed. You go down and there's often a parking spot not too far away, and they tend to overflow. Still like the idea of jamming people in though. Charlotte, I think you were next on the list. Was I? Oh, you're just, that wasn't you? You go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I'd just like to add my 2 cents to the parking conversation, and that is that there be adequate space for disabled parking and for parent parking, because I know getting doors open and strollers out and things like that with young children can be a challenge. So just make sure that those people are accommodated for, and that whatever kind of large group gathering is happening at the beach, the parking is not monopolized, so that regular citizens can still enjoy that space.
Thank you for that.
Lois?
Just to piggyback on those 2 comments, I would really love to see some accommodation when there's a group of 200 and over for some shuttle buses to, an alternate parking spot and a place where people can climb aboard a bus and come down and that would leave space for other people to park. It would, you know, relieve congestion on the area.
Thank you.
In that line, where do those shuttle buses go? The West Shore Park's the bus terminus there? Is that where we run shuttles? I'm embarrassed to say I've never been on one. Is that where you go? Park and Ride, yeah. Of course. I think I knew that, but just for information that you run, I know for some of the beach events that were bigger, they would run those shuttles. I think it's a great idea. Okay, so looks like we're clear. We move on to, are we on number 4 already?
We are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. So number 4 is food service providers. I'll preface this by letting you know that we currently are offering our beach food times. So that is, we're allowing a certain number of food vendors down at the beach on Saturdays and Sundays from 12 to 7 p.m. And some of these correspond with our music that is held down at the Lagoon. Otherwise, it's just a freestanding thing. So these types of events are less than 50 people. The waterfront stewardship plan, which we've discussed a bit here, envisions 2 areas with designated food service stalls. So the conditions for food service providers would be that they are permitted in designated locations and seasons only. Insurance for these food service providers would be required. We are proposing that the fee would be increased from the current $600 for the season to $1,000 for the season. And then there are a few proposed requirements for the designated food service stalls, which include electrical outlets and gas generators would be prohibited. As well, vendors would be required to use only compostable containers and that we would have compost bins provided for those containers.
Yeah, so we have the provincial requirements now too about you don't give a straw unless they ask and all that stuff, of course, presumably. Yeah. Pamela, I think you were up. Are you? No, Lois. Oh, yeah. There you go.
My question was about the containers, if that also included utensils as well.
Yes, and thank you for that. And a number of our food service providers are already providing wooden utensils and things along that nature, but we would ensure that it can include all receptacles.
Thank you. Lois.
Yeah, so I was really pleased to see the reference to the electrical outlets and not having the gas generators. I think that's fantastic. And just a little note that as of last week, we have a bear roaming the beach. So, you know, just keeping in mind that it'll be really important maybe to have bear-proof garbage containers for around the food trucks. And also, again, this has nothing to do with the Environment Committee per se, but for that waterfront stewardship diagram showing where the food trucks would be allowed close to Lagoon Road at Ocean Boulevard. To my mind, that's far too close to the intersection. And right now, there's significant problems where the food trucks are with people parking on the opposite side and, you know, and pedestrian, you know, blocking pedestrian access and that sort of thing. So if you can whisper in the ear of whoever's finalizing that plan that that needs to be moved further away from that intersection.
Thank you.
Thank you. Charlotte.
On July 15th, Clean BC's restrictions will get a little bit tighter for single-use food containers. So I'm hoping that that will make a difference. But I'm wondering, you know, is it possible, again, another whisper in the ear, to encourage the vendors to, you know, encourage their customers to bring refillable coffee cups and things like that. So, I mean, that's kind of in a perfect world, but I'd also like to see the vendors provide litter bins, which are then taken, because I know the city ones get filled really quickly and then they overflow, and then that causes different problems. And again, perhaps the vendors could, maybe as a condition, they could be required to organize a beach cleanup at some point within the next, I don't know, 6 months or something like that, just so there's more people out there picking up litter and raising the awareness that it is a problem in our community.
Thank you for those comments.
Thank you. Karen. There you go.
Brittany, the food trucks in the two areas, are those essentially either end of the lagoon near the washrooms and then near the bridge?
I'm just pulling up here, sorry. Stand by.
I'll just say that if the food truck is anywhere near the lagoon, like the bridge, I wouldn't support that just because too much noise and disruption, I think, to the birds.
I'll let Sandra speak to the
Okay.
locations. Thanks for that. I'll just share from the Waterfront Stewardship Plan. The locations are actually at the Lagoon washroom where it is currently, where there's a proposal for the Wave Plaza, I think is what it's called, a bit of an expansion of that. And the second location is at the crosswalk that will be put in place that's envisioned there at the riflery berm, if you can envision that. The photos in the report aren't very good because they don't have context along the lagoon, but those are the proposed locations.
Is that about halfway down, Sandra?
It's about halfway
Yeah.
down.
Midpoint?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
If not quite, there's sort of a muddy clay-like flats that sticks out into the ducks and the birds seem to congregate there quite a bit. That's I understand the riflery berm, the old target practice berm was there where they'd shoot.
Yeah, well,
And so that's where that crosswalk's happening.
knowing that mudflats sequester carbon, it seems like, again, we should be protecting those areas for biodiversity and climate solutions, protection of natural assets.
I'm just gonna jump in here to perhaps allow an opportunity to speak to that question of how this pathway, then the structure, the design sits somewhere between the question of urban use, public use, and the natural protection of the park. And Ms. Ian, that'd be great if someone
Thank
would
you.
just give a quick.
Sure. I can talk about the waterfront stewardship plan for days and days, so careful, I'll get going here. Yeah, so I think we could look at the multi-use pathway as the key feature in what is the overall thrust of the waterfront stewardship plan is really programming. How can that space accommodate the users without them doing damage to the ecology and sensitive habitat there? So the pathway is intended to consolidate a lot of the existing sort of go paths that are there and to try to maintain uses that are lighter on the landscape than there currently is. There'll be more opportunities for interpretive information, regulatory information, signage that helps people understand how best to use the space in a thoughtful way. There's also recommendations in the draft waterfront stewardship plan to get into things like how we're approaching the regulation for dogs on leash, other uses beyond these types of events that we're discussing today. So, and just to say, we're hoping to bring the draft waterfront stewardship plan back to council on July 8th for finalization of the draft. So.
Thank you for that, Ian. And I didn't mean to imply in any way that you should shorten it too much, or if you wanted to talk all day, I'd be happy to listen because it's a fascinating study and the plan is complicated. It's a challenging question, the intersection between urban use. I'd love to see a park well used, but I also love the parks that are protected and are allowed to thrive as a natural environment. And I understand, I think this committee has heard this before, but this notion that in the world on a protected natural urban waterfront is a rare, precious thing. And that's worth preserving, I think. However, So there's that idea, of course, here tonight, we're talking about trying to make it usable in a good way, right?
And I might add, there's the pathway, and then there's also the other major component, which is the ecosystem regeneration areas. So that's the whole way along the peninsula is major dune restoration areas. This is the most significant dune regeneration project on the West Coast right now. We're also looking at strategies to improve the habitat along the salt marshes. As has been said, they're very key for a lot of different reasons. And so that's a big part of the plan as well. We met with the project team that has been put together involving our engineering department and associate engineering and some sub-consultants that have been hired for the implementation of the project. And I can tell you that they're looking very specifically into how these things can be accomplished, how the salt marsh regeneration areas can be approached in tandem with the dune restoration areas. So it's exciting to see this work unfold, and happy to answer any questions if Queen has.
Super, that's very helpful. Thank you. Devon, I think you're on the list here.
Thanks, David. It says here in line 4 or row 4, less than 50 people. I don't see the need for a restriction on people. You know, as I mentioned earlier, that the commercial value becomes more lucrative as there's more people. So for a food vendor, they come to an event of 50 and capture 10% of the audience is still, you know, pretty low sales. So I just would encourage a reexamination of that. And the same goes for the fee of a seasonal fee, maybe an event fee. Like I look at these things about allowing small business to pilot a food business model. And so maybe some events would be more appropriate for their food business model, and they wouldn't be able to afford a whole season, but they may be able to try an event. For example, the Indigenous Day, maybe that's a possible $100 fee per event as a combination to small businesses and getting them involved. And then the third thing I just wanted to comment on this row is if you're doing a food service, there's kind of like, in my mind, 2 models where, you know, you get your food and then you can go sit at a picnic table and enjoy in a nice kind of remote area away from the group. But my preferred approach would maybe have a designated eating area where there's garbages and maybe a picket fence around. So you get some peer policing going on where, you know, people feel less obliged to leave garbage behind. And so just having these kind of preventative or social engineering kind of thoughts would be probably reduce the litter on the area. Just some general comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Pamela.
So I know I'm gonna be a Scrooge here, but, you know, listening to Ian, I'm kind of the exact opposite. Like, how realistic is it that a large group is going to follow anything? Right? And that they're not gonna trample over everything that they're not supposed to? And realistically, like, I'm looking at this and, you know, small group gathering, to me is 20 people. It's not 50 people unless you're having a beach cleanup and people are there to actually take care of the land. I don't know, I'm just looking at this 200 people running along there. I mean, is that realistic that they're gonna do what they're supposed to?
Yeah,
That's just
thank
my
you.
thought
No,
that I'm
thank you for
having
your
right now,
comment.
sorry.
Sorry to interrupt that. Thank you for the comment, and it's, yeah, all of these are open for discussion, so we're happy to tweak and adjust as your suggestions go. Thank you.
Perhaps I could slip in. How often do we have a group of 200, let's say, or do we have some history there to kind of make a reference to?
Yes, certainly. So as I mentioned, a number of our school days, school beach days, apologies, and those happen towards the end of the school season. They come down as a quite a large class size, and then just some of our recurring events, such as Tour de Victoria, which is kind of more of a pass through. The Western Beach Sprints are one that are an event that has happened for the past, I believe they're on their 3rd year now. So that is another recurring one that is a large.
The music on the music in the park, I guess we call it now, but the music events on the beach, would they particularly have 200? I've been to a couple that are,
Yeah, depending on the weather and the date, they can be
Well, of course, yeah.
larger.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Karen.
Thank you. Ian, really good to hear about the dune restoration. This is the UN decade of ecosystem restoration. I prefer to think of us not as Scrooges, but prioritizing stewardship. The Esquimalt Lagoon Sanctuary is one of 2 places of its kind left on southern Vancouver Island. The other is just down the road at Whitty's Beach. I think as the population of the southern island continues to grow, there are going to be huge impacts. I think it best to address them proactively. And I think there are lots of places for people to go. And it's not like we're stopping anyone from going out and enjoying nature. I think it's critical for people to get out and enjoy nature. I just do not agree with using nature as your recreational party land. So the group, to me, I think I'm not in favor of most group gatherings, but if it is a stewardship focused group, like a beach cleanup or a classroom looking at Pacific sandlance and forage fish, to me, they're going to be much more sensitive to the environment. And I'm just going to leap ahead to your next 3 examples of a photography class, a painting class, and a dog obedience class. The photography class, again, I support nothing commercial in that area. Certainly lots of photographers go there and capture the beauty and share it with all of us. So I totally support that. Painting class, we've got Arts and Culture Colwood. They're offering painting classes. I've been to one. It was terrific. I hope they'll continue to do more. And maybe they could even do a photography exhibit focused on stewardship. And maybe Colwood could do a public relations program similar to the 2021 calendar, but just focused on stewardship and protection, or nature cards like the Machosen Art Pod and the Machosen Foundation have done, just to help increase public awareness. But dog obedience, no, not near the bird sanctuary. And I would really encourage you to be, Ian mentioned, there's going to be waterfront stewardship is looking at dog guidelines. CRD Parks is experiencing a lot of challenges, especially in Isuk Park, which is a wilderness park, because they didn't introduce clear guidelines in the beginning. Saanich Parks has experienced considerable feedback. So the clearer the regulations from the beginning, I think the better off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we on to number 5 or is it 6?
Yeah.
Anyway, next.
Yeah, so we got a bit of a preview, thank you. But this number 5 is the commercial events and activities. So these are revenue generating activities, which would include commercial sales, fitness classes, things like private sauna, and things like windshield repair as well. So these type of, we're suggesting that these are not permitted at the Lagoon. But as was just discussed, we had a couple questions on things such as photography classes and painting classes and those artistic sort of ventures. Any comments? Welcome.
Charlotte?
Thanks, David. It seems to me that some of the examples here actually fit into the small group gathering, because I don't know how many photography classes would have over 50 participants. So it seems to me that they would, if there was yoga or painting, that they would fit into the small group. And so they're not as commercial as some of the other examples, like if you were down there selling t-shirts or, providing a service. So I think maybe we've muddied things a little bit here and not had them so clear.
Yeah, certainly not the intention, but these were just more revenue generating as an umbrella. These would be things that residents are paying for. And so whether or not those would be permitted. So thank you for that. And we can do our best to clarify further.
Thank you. Lois.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm supportive of what Charlotte was saying. I'm sorry, Karen was saying about the large group gatherings. It's much easier to not offer something to begin with and to take it away later. And, you know, if as the new facilities are implemented, upgraded, the walkways, et cetera, there, I suppose that'll be a time when there can be a more easy transition to different rules. But with the opening of Royal Bay, hopefully the Royal Bay Beach, I think David, last year, I guess they had the music down there, and I think they did have 200 people there. It was really packed, and like there are some places that are less delicate to offer the large group gatherings than Lagoon Beach. And I certainly support what you say about the dog obedience classes. You don't want a bunch of untrained dogs running around the sanctuary area.
Thank you.
Have to come back once they're trained. Then the designation we have right now with the washrooms sort of being the east-west line of delineation between off-leash and leashed dogs makes sense. Although at the bird sanctuary, a dog on a leash is a threat to a bird. I mean, they surely they respond to any animal and they don't know if it's on a leash or not. Well, anyhow, that brings us to Pamela.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Karen and Lois. I'm wondering if everything here is really truly looked at through an environmental and sustainability and stewardship lens, and if perhaps there were some sort of rubric developed in terms of, instead of looking at this versus a paid event versus a non-paid event, a commercial, is the event going to impact the environment? So holding a yoga class where everybody's paid $5 to be there is going to be a very low impact, right? Versus a music, you know, even if it's just 10 people, but they're blaring something, right? So that you guys, you know, that there's some sort of rubric formulated when these decisions are, you know, being made.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Devon.
Yeah, I'd second that. I hadn't thought about that until you mentioned that there, Pamela, but it's a good suggestion for sure. I'm more focused on the 5 and 6 about the fee structure and how is that gonna be kind of, you know, decided here. To me, it makes sense for the commercial events to have like a, you know, a tax or a per person kind of fee. And then for the filming, I'd prefer to see more of a perpetuity preference. So like maybe some kind of a royalty structure. I don't know if you can negotiate those things or not, or have a standard ask. But, you know, I think why I'm focused on the business side is because I often think the business side will somewhat justify the environmental side. So if we're collecting fees and this becomes like a revenue generating event structure, what happens to that funds? And does it go into general coffers, or is it going to go strictly into administration costs? Or can it go to like 30 to 60% towards ecological enhancement and have that as kind of a tenet of the program?
Let
Sandra?
Sandra address that one.
So my understanding is that as a city, for this type of thing, we can't generate revenue. It would only be to cover the cost of administrative work. So there wouldn't be a surplus generally.
Yeah, okay, yes.
And, you know, that may be the policy of the Colwood, but to me, that takes away from the balancing act that we're trying to walk here with the environment and recreation. You know, we need to create business opportunities to support the environment. And I think that's an important message. And maybe I'm isolated in that thought process, but I don't think they're juxtaposed.
I think, you know, if you align them right, they can be beneficial to, on both sides. Thank you. Karen.
Not sure I agree with you, Devin, but I wanted to go back to what Pamela said about the rubric of how your table is organized. And for instance, a yoga class might fit into a small group, but maybe it's a yoga class where they're playing loud music. So I would like to see a framework that looks at how nature sensitive is the activity, because I think a school group of 75 can do less damage than a small group of 25 who just want to party. I think as far as fees, absolutely, I charge a fee for filming in large events. I hope it can go to, you know, compensating staff time, or for protection, maybe to Elsie for stewardship, or something directed towards preservation of nature, because I'm not convinced that business is going to provide that. And again, I just want to say that this is a really rare, sensitive, fragile ecosystem. There's going to be people there regardless. I hope we can minimize the impacts. Thank you.
Thank you. Pamela.
And this goes to number 6, filming, you know, that there has to be protections in place for a film crew to not go in and just stomp all over everything as well, and with heavy equipment and you know, all of that. So I'd be wary of filming going on too, so.
Thank you.
Okay.
Want to carry on?
So we'll jump to the last one, which we've discussed a little bit here, but that is our filming event type. So these are movie shoots or commercial shoots. It's a beautiful area, of course. Folks want to showcase it in their works. So we are proposing that these would be permitted if event conditions are met, and that we would suggest to impose a new fee in consultation with the Film Commission, as I mentioned. And these fees would align very likely with the City of Victoria fees. That has been the direction that we've been given by the Film Commission of the Vancouver Island South. So questions, comments?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen.
Again, I think the filming, to me, in context, it all depends. Maybe it's oceanographer Sylvia Earle coming to do a documentary about coral reefs dying and how important it is to protect oceans. Yes, let's do that in Colwood. If it's you know, I don't know, a party film or something of that nature. So I don't want to make things more difficult for you. I think if you eliminate groups, it is going to save you some time. It will take time to do that. I'm not suggesting, you know, cold turkey, but gradually, sensitively, respectfully, with awareness, just the way the Wildwood sauna was diverted. And then you can look more specifically at the larger events and the filming, and see, do they meet the criteria? And maybe you develop those criteria in consultation with expertise from Elsie, from Peninsula Streams, from Green Shores. So I'd just like to see it more contextual and minimal human impacts.
Charlotte.
I consider the humans as part of the system as well. And so I'm thinking about the impact on the humans that live around the area. And I'm unclear as to what benefit there would be to the residents along the lagoon and in Colwood. So if none of the revenue can go towards stewardship or more protection, just to cover the admin fees, then I'm just not clear what the benefit is and why we would do it. And I'd also, again, like to make sure that there's no displacement of the community users if filming was to be happening, because from what I've seen in the past, they bring in trailers and there's equipment and there's noise and there's lights and there's the residents can get edged out of the area. And one more thing, so I think a few years ago, there was some filming done that was quite disruptive. There was helicopters at night and lots of noise and things. And so I hope that whatever we do, we consider the people that live here and the impact on them. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra, could I ask to clarify on the fees and what we're allowed to and not to do with that money?
Yeah, I'll have to get clarity actually from finance on that, but my understanding is that fees that the city charges are solely to cover administrative activity,
true.
not to generate revenue. Yeah. I'll
So
have to get clarity from finance.
that would be a direction of council could change that so that we could collect.
Potentially we could get direction to.
Mr. Burhill seems to be
Yeah.
stirred by this question. Thank you.
I think Sandra covered it, but it's just to say that it's a law that we all local governments operate under, that we can't generate a revenue beyond the cost of providing the service.
Right.
And so my understanding is that council could assign revenues from permitting to a specific purpose, but they couldn't be in excess of the costs of providing the actual administrative.
So if we designated the permits toward cleanup, restoration, returning it back to some standard that we presumably they made a bit of a mess. So we collect money and we can say this much money is needed to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, picking up litter is a clear, obvious one, but to return it to its, make sure, we discussed that earlier with the idea of a deposit where we do a little quick inspection and then we get, we use those funds to fix it if they didn't clean it up properly. Conversely, we could perhaps have a work crew as in lieu of fees that said, we will guide, but you could have 20 people show up on Monday after your event to help clean up under the direction of city staff, perhaps, or something vague like that. I mean, it's maybe getting a bit out there, but it's not a cash thing.
Certainly security deposits are something that the city works with for a bunch of different reasons.
Yeah.
So for instance, when someone wants to do work on a boulevard or within a city park, there could be a security deposit. I think really when we're talking about assigning the revenues from fees, you're really talking about a bit of a shell game insofar as that the money that would be paying for that administrative function would be coming from somewhere else. So something just to keep in mind, and certainly there's going to be a lot of costs associated with management of this space going to the future. There already is now. One of the challenges that we're wrestling with the implementation of the Waterfront Stewardship Plan as to how to maintain controlled access to the areas that will be planted with, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of dune grasses and different plant material. We need to really carefully make sure that that space is, that people are aware that they shouldn't be walking in there. On the water side of the regeneration areas, those are areas that it's, the winter storms are going to make it very difficult for actual structures to be built to prevent people from accessing those areas. So there's all manner of different considerations that will have long-term costs for the city in managing this space. So I think the committee might want to contextualize this conversation in that larger picture of ongoing costs.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. On my list, Pamela is next.
Yeah, so just going back to the filming, are there ways to make sure if this is like a major, you've got, X-Men and everything else, that's gonna be a lot of trailers, that's gonna be gas, these are not electric trailers running, there's catering services. there's, you know, there could be fake gun noises going on and, you know, things like that. So, you know, and with the fees, are the fees that they pay going to cover, you know, maybe somebody needs to be there on site to make sure they're not trampling over the $100,000 that we just put in to plant something, you know, are there going to be people there to monitor?
Right. I was just gonna say not at this time, but yes, thank you. That's something definitely to consider. And as we further define this, then that's maybe something we can look into and how we implement some sort of regulatory checks afterwards or during. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and I think that problem's, the public in
Right.
general it's an issue. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add to Brittany's response through the chair, you know, there's different approaches that we're already contemplating with respect to helping people use the space in a you know, sustainable way. For example, we've talked to the CRD staff that run the LC organization. How could we work with LC to develop a volunteer program or a you know, citizen scientist program that could help support ongoing management of the space? You know, there has been interest in the past on the behalf of LC to work more closely with the city, and we think that supporting the success of waterfront stewardship plan implementation is one of the best ways that they could do that. So yes, the hope is that we're developing a more robust way to monitor and help people use the space appropriately.
Yeah, I sort of envision like at the Gold Street Parking, when we go up there, you see Parks Canada people in uniform roaming about, and it's unbelievable what a resource they are. If you have, I know when the kids were little, we go and all of a sudden you've got your own private resource person helping out. And meanwhile, they're saying, oh, excuse me, could you please not climb over into that area? Like, is that what you're talking, that idea? Something along those lines? That's kind of what it comes to mind. And I think that's brilliant. Okay, thanks. Next on the list, Devon.
Yeah, just to get back to the cost structures component, does it make sense to have a budget code that would be associated with the waterfront stewardship plan? Then you can track your costs in terms of income revenue generated and cost of the plan, you know, for ecological restoration. Because at this point, it doesn't seem like, you know, is whether it's a net benefit or a net cost to the city. And like, I'd imagine your costs would be appropriate, well, proportional to your fee structure. So just some general accounting of these, you know, debits and credits might bring us to a more solid foundation of what we should be requesting here and how the money should be dispersed would be my recommendation here. I do have further comments about the stuff, the plan, but I'll wait till the next opportunity to speak, just in case.
Thank you. Was there a question? Was there an answer? Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Karen.
Thank you. Ian refers to managing for uncertainty, and there's a lot of uncertainty. Foreshore erosion is uncertain. Indigenous reconciliation negotiations are still uncertain. So to be able to control things within our control right now makes a lot of sense. I had a question about the road, which of course fragments the ecosystem. And I know it's used as a commuter for commuter traffic. And it seems to me a couple of years ago when the bridge foundation was undermined, there was a study done and there was a survey about putting a barrier in the center so that the road was no longer a through road. You could access from either end. Given that, you know, the wash off from the pavement and the toxicity impacting the lagoon and the ocean, is there any consideration of closing that road to commuter traffic?
through the chair. So we touched on dogs. So the next hot one is the traffic. So yeah, so you mentioned that there was previous studies, there was previous surveys. I think it really came to a head when the city decided to close down the road during COVID. And there was a lot of community interest in, what is the future of this road? Is it going to be something that is prioritized? And so a survey was undertaken, and there was strong support for both within and outside of Colwood by the people. That wasn't a scientific survey, but it was one that showed that there was a strong support for keeping the road open, as well as looking at keeping the road closed for the reasons that have been discussed today. The plan that's currently before council will be before council on the 8th and was endorsed for public engagement last summer. Sees the road continue to function as a thoroughfare in either direction. It's understood that the future of that space and in the face of sea level rise and storm activity, it just may not be feasible to maintain that as a thoroughfare in the long term. So some aspects of managed retreat have been foreseen, the first steps of which have already been taken. So the gates that have been installed that would control access during times at which the road is not safe to travel have already been carried out. However, I think that the future council would be crossing that bridge, unintended, when conditions meant for that road not to be made it difficult to be maintained. The real challenge being that just the costs of maintaining a road in such a dynamic coastal landscape are very high, and we've got the studies to show that. So the $6 million project that's underway now, it's a costly one, but it's actually, because of the nature-based solutions that are applied, one that's a lower cost than, say, a traditional engineered solution. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
Thank you very much, Ian. I had a question that was popped out of my head. Must be getting long. It was about this filming. So did we not just have the TV show, the Maid thing film? Was that not recent? And was it disruptive? How did that work out? Well, they were down by the bridge, weren't they, set up down there? Do I remember that correctly, or?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, they were in several locations. They were down by the bridge for a short time.
Okay,
From my point of view, they were very respectful of the area. Of course,
sure.
in the report, you'll see the conditions by which all of these permits are issued, which is that staff require that folks are as respectful as possible of the environment. As Brittany mentioned, we'll be fine tuning those requirements based on the baseline biodiversity study so that we get really more specific about those things, about timing and locations. In terms of filming, there are some intangibles we're aware of that the Film Commission often talks about, the revenue that kind of activity brings to our region. Those are things we sort of consider. You mentioned trailers and things. They would never be permitted in the Lagoon area, nor would noisy sort of explosives filming or anything like that currently. So this is more just to think about going forward. Do we continue to let even the least invasive type of filming happen there? Or do we move it all away?
Right.
Sure.
So I can understand that the movie shoot edition that you've got here, television shoot, is it's going to be lighter, if anything, than a film. So then details like I heard mentioned about the arc lamps at night. You mentioned the gunshots or explosives. There's going to be certain limitations. Perhaps they can't shoot at night because the bright lights are disruptive to the bird population, perhaps, or the wildlife in general. I don't know. How far are you in the process of developing those standards, or is that?
So thank you for the question. Those standards are already in place.
Yeah.
I think that at this time, we would not allow someone to do night filming along the lagoon, for example. It does happen at Royal Roads University, which is one of the most popular places for filming, at the castle, which of course is slightly removed from the lagoon. So already we're quite sensitive to that kind of activity. I think in addition to Maid, the last one that I remember was a Volvo commercial. And so they closed the road for a short time as they filmed the Volvo driving along the ocean. And it was, you know, not very intrusive at all. But those are the types of things we're looking for guidance on.
Yeah. Okay, that clarifies it, because I think the recommendation that's in the agenda here is asking for the committee's recommendations. Are we expected to produce something specific? I think there's lots of notes been taken. Can Brittany, be assured, or can we be assured that these are moving through and that's enough? Or what would you like from us?
Thank you. Yes, I think we can review the notes that have been taken and review the video and capture your recommendations from them, and then bring those forward to council along with the Parks Trail and Recreation Committee recommendations.
Okay, thank you. We have people would like to make more comments, and I'm not trying to end the meeting. I'm just trying to round it up in my mind about where we're headed here. Devon? Sorry. There you go.
Thanks, David. Now that we finished discussing the table, I just had some general comments I noted on your document or briefing here. I think it's a great idea having these community parks, the 4 that you guys have put in there. I really like it. I'm just wondering, is there like a calendar or something? I often see, like, I'm near the Herm Williams Park, and I often see birthday parties there. Yes, they should be talking to the city, but at the very least, maybe they can be consulting a calendar or something like that. Just when you take an application fee, maybe it gets put into a calendar kind of deal. Just, that's my first question. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We do have an internal calendar that we review and track all of our events within, just to make sure there's no overlap. We only allow one group within Herm Williams per day, for example. In my opinion, that's we want to keep that maybe private. Just we could maybe look at blocking time or something like that. But all special events do come through myself, and then I do review our calendar and get back to the applicant with times that they're available, basically. So I don't know if that answers that question, but
No, that sounds great. The only thing I would comment back there is just maybe consider making it public unless it's too cumbersome, just in terms of upkeep and whatnot. And then the other thing I've made a note here about is for the waterfront stewardship plan, does it take into visual quality objectives? And namely, like the offshore tankers. You know, we could be increasing the number of offshore tankers, and you know, it would be nice in my mind to have the city you know, at least say, you know, this is having a good vista is important to us and the residents, and maybe trying to, you know, prevent as much tanker visual quality impairment as possible. Yeah.
Thank you, through the chair. So I trust that Member Barnes would see the freighters as a negative as opposed to
Yeah, that's a conversation.
yeah. I mean, the plan does not see that as in scope, given that the anchorage is not within the jurisdiction of the city of Colwood. That being said, I know it's an issue that's come before Colwood Council in the past. There's been a local initiative to try to limit the use of that area for what is primarily bulk cargo freighters serving Point Roberts and yeah. So
Thanks for the answer.
Thank you, Devon. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's great.
Lois?
I guess this maybe should have been raised under the small group gathering. It doesn't exactly fit, so I'll raise it here. I see a lot of memorials being put up on the beach, and those can often include things like crosses, plastic flowers, photographs, teddy bears. And I don't even know what people are burying underneath those crosses, whether they're burying their dogs or whether it's, you know, just a place that they go to remember. Or, certainly if there were some rules related to biodegradability of anything that is erected, that would be helpful. But it just seems to me that that's an unsuitable use of the beach and the lagoon.
Sandra?
Thank you for raising that. The city is working to transition away from that practice. I know, I think Gord, our parks manager, is on the call, but he has been speaking to the groups that we're aware of who have memorials to let them know that we'll be transitioning away from that practice and toward some sort of organized memorial system that we haven't quite nailed down yet, but
Good.
we're conscious of that one and working on it.
Thank you.
Fabulous, thank you. Karen, you're next on my list. Please.
Wanted to go back to Devin's comment about the tankers. And I believe the municipality of Metchosin brought forward a motion to UBCM about no longer allowing the tankers to anchor there because their anchors drag the floor and obviously disrupt sea life. And even though it's not maybe within Colwood's purview, I guess it would be Department of Fisheries and Oceans, a federal responsibility. I do think Colwood could maybe support Metchosin in that initiative because biodiversity is not border dependent. And I think it's up to all of us to protect, respect, and steward where we live. And we're so incredibly fortunate to live here. It would be a shame to lose what we have inherited.
Thank you, Karen. Charlotte?
I just, I'll just ask for a little bit of clarity on a detail here. So on page 9, on number 5, when it's talking about using active transportation, and it ends with providing incentive for choosing active modes. And I just wonder what ideas have been floated around what those incentives might look like, because I go out on a limb and say most of us don't live within walking distance of the beach. So we have to get there somehow if we're going to enjoy it. So I'm just really curious as to what the incentives might be.
When we're speaking with respect to events, we'll often encourage folks to ride their bikes. We'll invite Capital Bike, the regional network of active transportation, I guess I'll call them, to come down and have a bike valet service. People who use the bike valet service in the past, we have offered, gift cards to local businesses or other promotional items to recognize their contribution to our active transportation efforts. So it's that kind of thing during events, but I think potentially Ian has something about infrastructure.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so this is a challenge moving forward. The development of areas nearby are going to see more population pressures and more visitorship of the space. So when looking at how we're going to be working with the dune regeneration areas, we're looking at the on-site parking potentially being impacted in areas where the angle of repose for the back of the dunes has to be at an appropriate angle such that it won't be sloughing and falling. That means it needs to be wide enough to really do what it needs to do, which may impact some of the parking areas at the north end of the peninsula. That has led us to try to find other ways in which we can help people get to the site. And that one of the probably the most exciting examples is a plan for a connection to the Galloping Goose via a 4-meter wide multi-use pathway along Ocean Boulevard. So that's going from the bridge northward to the Galloping Goose, right around where the city's bridge is going to come out onto the Goose. So that plan in its conceptual form was approved by council last year. We're hoping to start finding some funding opportunities for that. And that would obviously create a really a great way for active transportation or people on bikes and walking to access the waterfront much more easily than they do now.
Thank you very much. My list. Did you Want to say more, or are you finished?
Yeah, just one more.
Yeah,
thing.
please, go ahead.
Um,
You're on. Yeah.
Okay, so I live on Triangle Mountain and I love to walk down to the beach, but then I don't really want to walk all the way back up again. So I used to be able to get on the bus down there by the washrooms, but the bus doesn't stop there anymore for passengers. So I'm just wondering if, you know, there's conversations around or with BC Transit or other organizations that can help with those sorts of incentives.
Yes, through the chair. So interestingly enough, we did have when BC Transit was reviewing their West Shore Transit Plan. This is going back a couple of years now. They asked us, could we run a bus along Ocean Boulevard along the peninsula? And the challenge was the capacity of the bridge. It's not able to take the weight of a full size bus. And we also thought potentially that would add to the existing traffic disruptions that happen and the impacts to wildlife. So currently they've agreed to a new service. It could potentially be seasonal at first, but it would serve Fort Rod Hill on the north end of the waterfront to connect that area through a new line. That's actually being undertaken now in partnership with Parks Canada. So they're working with the city and BC Transit to improve their site so that the buses could turn around and get back up. I know it doesn't help folks accessing from Triangle Mountain, but that's one area where we look to have some near-term success with better transit access. I can't speak to the more recent changes to the transit routes as it relates to Lagoon. I just off the top of my head, I can't think how that might have been impacted, but certainly there's much better transit service to and from the Colwood Exchange and South Colwood via the Royal Bay Exchange. So folks that wanted to walk down to the Royal Bay Beachlands end of the waterfront would have better access as well.
If I could intercede, I think that Route 60 stops down there at Charlotte we were discussing this before the meeting, that it's on her understanding that it doesn't actually stop and disembark and embark right at the washroom building there,
That's right, yeah. Now
as it
goes
used
up
to,
to-
although,
Yeah.
but we don't know for sure. So maybe this is something we could double check with. They certainly should, I think. There is a stop there. I think I saw it. Not, yeah. So maybe we can get to the bottom of that. Because it's certainly more transit is always required, beneficial, not less.
Mhm.
We had a BC Transit workshop in Langford just 2 weeks ago. Saw people chewing their nails in the room. So they're aware of the problems, that's for sure. Okay. If there's no one else right now, I would just like to ask again that the recommendation to me, we've satisfied it. Rather than making or voting on a recommendation to council, simply do we need to recommend to council that they accept our 101 solutions to your problems down there, your situation there? Do we need to vote on something? Maybe Amanda, can you help me with this? It's like we had this nice little roundtable discussion, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. I've learned a lot today. I just want to make sure we go away from the meeting if there's any direction to council, or if there's a kind of a body in the minutes or somehow a body of ideas that we could ask council to look at and accept. Or okay, Karen, maybe you've got an answer.
What I would like to see coming from the Environment Committee is a recommendation that all events prioritize ecosystem health, stewardship, biodiversity protection, and minimize human impacts. That's
Okay. Is that that's a motion? Is that not? Or can we not vote on something like that? Do you like that, Brittany? I know I don't follow protocol. I'm always asking people's opinion. Amanda, do you have something there that Karen, get your microphone, please? Yeah.
A recommendation that all events prioritize ecosystem health, biodiversity, and human impact. Is that correct?
minimize human impact.
Yeah, minimize human impact.
You don't want to give the impression that we support all events.
Well-
Events, limit all group events and prioritize ecosystem health, biodiversity protection, stewardship, and minimize human impacts.
Okay, so we have different element in there. Not quite sure how you'd limit what that means, but we can, Pamela,
I would just second that.
okay. So if that's a motion, move, motion, yeah. At committee, my understanding is we don't need a seconder. But anyway, Devon,
Yeah, my only hang up is the limit all events. I think that some events would be, did I misinterpret that? Yeah, I think some events are beneficial. Yeah. Yeah, okay, sorry.
perhaps we could have the motion again to clarify that aspect.
So the recommendation would be that the Environment Committee recommend to council that all group events be limited. Is that correct? And prioritize ecosystem health, biodiversity protection and stewardship, and minimize human impact.
Karen,
I would say limit group events and consider on a case-by-case basis. If we can reword it slightly, Amanda, limit group events, consider on a case-by-case basis to prioritize ecosystem health, biodiversity protection, stewardship, and minimize human impact.
okay, so maybe you could read it now. Can you put it up on the screen? Is that too much bother? Or would you? I mean, it's not too much. It's a little easier to read and understand for me anyway. If we have a motion, once we see something, there'll be an opportunity to discuss the motion specifically. And an opportunity also to make any suggested amendments if those are to be there. However, let's comment on the motion recommendation. The Environment Committee recommend to council that council limit group events and consider on a case-by-case basis to prioritize ecosystem health, biodiversity protection, and stewardship and minimize human impact. So I think maybe we haven't got our motion yet. Could you say it again, Pamela? You weren't, your mic wasn't on. Can you?
Oh, yeah, no.
Could you? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just a
Yeah.
spelling
Yeah.
check, just
You're-
basis.
You need to do it through your mic so we can all hear.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, it was just to correct the basis to basis. That's all.
Oh, cool.
It was just a spelling.
Yeah, no, that's good. If there's anyone watching online, by the way, they're not necessarily on the screen, they might be listening and this is recorded. If your mic's not on, it doesn't appear on the digital recording, which is why we insist on the mics, not only because my hearing is what it used to be. Devon?
Yeah, I'm struggling with this limited events. Is that what the committee wants, is that we want to reduce the number of town events overall in this area? Or do we want to, because it looks by the table here that the events were trending up in numbers, the special event data. And so are we gonna, is the goal to prevent people from going to these areas? Okay, then, yeah, that would be reflective of what you got here. I'm more of a different mindset of, I think these things can happen in an ecologically appropriate way. And I'm very strongly supportive of, using these events, people and nature to support ecological enhancement. So a little bit different of a group, but majority rules.
Thank you. Well, we
there.
will get a chance to vote, and if the motion fails, you can always write another one. Or you can propose an amendment. Yeah. Pamela?
Just to respond to that, I think that that's where the case by case basis comes in. If the event is something that is going to promote education and stewardship and appreciation versus just a party, and I think that's where that case by case basis comes in.
Thank you. And, did you want to speak, or is your mic just still on? I just, the wording of it is a bit awkward for me too, because I think that when you restrict, as I think Sandra spoke very, very well to the rules, the expectations that exist now, as opposed to maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago when X-Men was done. I think that already limits what happens down there. And we've made some changes to the type of events and so on. However, this motion, I can support it simply to move a recommendation through. Council will look at it. And I think that they'll hear through the minutes, have access to the many ideas that came. But I hear you actually, what Devon's saying about the idea of this is a public park, so we want it to be used and used well, because the education even isn't a component. And I really love the idea of volunteers down there in their little shoreline stewardship outfits, approaching people who are feeding the pigeons to ask them not to, and having little clutches of people around them learning about the wild, or the plants that are growing, and maybe guiding tours that can meet every hour on the hour at the bridge for groups of people to saunter along and study different spot areas. Like, I don't know how this grows, and it grows by having people there and active. There, that's my sermon for the day. Karen?
I'm wondering, David, if we make the motion to say the Environment Committee commends council on transitioning large events away from the Lagoon Beach, and then the rest of it I think is fine. Supports council moving large events away from Lagoon Beach. So it doesn't mean people cannot enjoy the beach, or specific activities cannot happen, but it's just you're no longer open for permits for weddings, parties, that kind of thing. That's
Yeah, I think this is a fairly wide open motion. I think we covered a lot of ground here, and that covers quite a bit, I think, without shutting down anything. And I think council can take good guidance from such a thing. Devon?
I don't have anything related to the motion, but I'm just wondering, Brittany, do you know if Colwood has an art walk? It's a little bit different of a tangent here, but they're usually pretty successful.
No, we don't, that I'm aware of at the moment.
Okay, maybe that is kind of just a suggestion here with your OCP policy 13243 that you've made a mention of. But sorry, I kind of jumbled the business here, so we can go back to the normal business.
Permission to divert. Thanks, Devon. Any more comments? I'll call the question on this. Man is still busily trying to get this the wording right. Karen?
just looking at the recommendation again, it's that the Environment Committee
Yeah.
supports council,
Yeah, it's on the top
council's
sentence.
council's intention, maybe.
Yeah, the environment committee recommends to council.
Oh,
and then
sorry,
the
there.
motion reads there.
But then it says that council support, okay.
Yeah, that's the recommendation, is that council support the following. I know it's the way it's written, I think. So, okay, that's sweet. I'll call the question. All those in favor? It's unanimous. It's carried. Thank you, Brittany, very much. Thank you, Sandra and Ian, Farley, Amanda, everybody for your help. And a call for adjournment. A motion to adjourn, someone? Pamela, you've not had one. All those in favor, opposed? No one's opposed. Adjourned. Thank you.